So good afternoon to everyone. I'd like to present to you what is social solidarity economy in Asia. We can define SSE or social solidarity economy as an economic system developed by ordinary people as an alternative to the neoliberal market economy. Now, what is market economy? Every economy has a market, but when you say market economy, it has a special meaning. And this is where we have to differentiate, because SSE uses social norms, ethics, other social philosophies to influence consumer behavior. Economic transactions are guided by core values, sociological and political relationships. Now, when you say market economy, the principal direction of influence is reversed. It is the economic factors that shape politics and sociology. What are economic factors? Price, volume, quality, brand. These are the economic factors that dictate relationships. So when you say market economy, there are no core values at all. There is no ethic at all. There are no core values, sociology, no relationship at all. It's only price, brand, etc. So remember that, because when you encounter again market economy, it does not mean an economy for market only. Now, the focal point of development in a market economy is the enterprise, where labor is just a cost of production to be minimized, and the orientation is profit over people and planet. SSE, on the other hand, the focal point of development is the community, and you have heard this morning from our speakers, where the household is the basic unit, and the territory defines the resources for the community's development. The orientation is people and planet over profits. How do we now look at development of SSE in different countries? We have to look at the development of capitalist globalization. It went through 3 different stages. The first, right after 1950s to 1960s, the predominance of the U.S. economy, foreign direct investment, U.S. products being exported to developing countries. FDIs mainly from U.S. Second stage, 1960s to mid-1980s, Japan and Germany came into the picture. And this created problems for the U.S. The domestic wages in the U.S. Went down, profit margins went down, and trade deficit in the U.S. increased. So what did the U.S. transnational corporations do? They established export processing zones in select countries, and which countries became the newly industrializing countries. And this led to export growth in newly industrializing countries and growth of the world economy. The third stage, 1980s to the present, there was a sharp acceleration of FDIs, foreign direct investments. FDIs grew rapidly than world trade and world exports, and FDI became the new engine of growth. There was internationalization of production led by US, Japan, and Germany, and there was a change in product line and restructuring of the organization of production. Transnational corporation investments shifted to more capital-intensive, high-tech manufacturers. Before, there was only manufacture of labor-intensive industries like textiles and so forth. But now, in developed countries, you can see automobiles being manufactured, TV, computers, power, machine tools, cameras, cell phones, pharmaceuticals, semiconductors. It has shifted. So transnational corporations develop cross-border production networks for global value chains. So what happened? Because there was an influx of FDIs in developed countries, and manufacturing became a new way of organizing production. Developed countries borrowed heavily because they wanted to improve infrastructure to attract foreign investments. But in late 1960s, the oil prices increased, and it became more burdensome to pay the debt, so they had to borrow more. So So what happened? The world economy went into recession, oil prices increased, foreign debts became a burden. In 1982, August 1982, Mexico declared moratorium. This will become the Mexican debt crisis. Now, this debt crisis, shadowing what will happen in the next millennium. There was the debt crisis, economic slowdown, massive capital outflow from developing countries, production slowed down, there was unemployment. But the bigger debt crisis came in 2000, at the turn of the century. Argentina defaulted 100 billion sovereign loans. 61 other countries followed. There was a massive devastation of the Argentine economy. 1-to-1 peso, the Argentine peso was pegged 1-to-1 to dollar. It's made imports cheaper. The transnational corporations flocked to the country. It drove away the small major industries, enterprises and big business out of business. Unemployment rose. It bankrupted local capitalists. The capitalists spread the country, brought their money to the US. The middle class was wiped out. They became part of the poor. People had nowhere to turn except to one another. But Argentinians had the basics. They had the resources, they had the factories, they had the machines, the land, and above all, they were willing to work. This was the basis of social solidarity economy in Latin America. And these are the basic features. Number one, self-convened neighborhood assemblies. That's why if you listen to Mr. Paul Singer, he was always telling you, just talk to one another, just have dialogue, because this is one of the bases for creating social solidarity economy. These assemblies were spread over the country, often linked through websites, debated and organized solutions. 45,000 community gardens called puertas sprouted all over spaces that are available that fed the millions of people. 5,000 local barter networks facilitated exchange of goods without money, allowing millions to avoid destitution. Microfinance revived entrepreneurship. Workers seized scores of factories after all they were abandoned already by the capitalists, and they rehabilitated these factories. Next. So, in Asia, what is the situation? In Asia, there are two types of social mission-oriented organizations that are working on the sector called social solidarity economy. Type 1 of enterprise are people working together to advance their own well-being. Typical cases are savings and credit cooperative, producer cooperatives, free trade organizations. But there are type 2 social enterprises. These are people working together to help the poor. Typical cases, microfinance institutions, NGO, charitable organizations. Now, why is it like this? Because the poor in developing Asia, they do not have skills, they have out-of-school youth, and it is difficult for them to have access to resources. So they need helping organizations. Now, the question is, where is solidarity in these organizations? If you look at the organizations, cooperative, microfinance institutions, savings credit cooperatives, there is solidarity in the organization. But when you look at the members and the enterprises that they're developing, there is no solidarity. This is the basic situation in Asia. So the main development thrust of social enterprises in Asia are the following. Number one, the ultimate goal is poverty alleviation. Number two, the strategy is to enable the poor to have access to resources. This is the main thrust, access to resources. Number three, entrepreneurial activities with social objectives are undertaken in search for social inclusion in the neoliberal market economy. So we're looking only for social inclusion in the existing mainstream neoliberal economy. Solidarity or working together is a means of making more cost-effective the use of market mechanisms by solidarity organizations of market small entrepreneurs to pursue social objectives. The synergy among individuals and solidarity organizations is not geared towards developing a solidarity economy. Now, this kind of economy developed by socially oriented organizations, which use marketing mechanisms to pursue explicit social objectives, is called social economy. So how do the concept and practice of social economy differ between Asia and developed countries? In developed countries, social economy is operated and managed by skilled workers and professionals who lost their jobs and now they are working for themselves. In developing Asia, social economy is operated and managed by unskilled workers and school dropouts who cannot find a job in either the public or private sectors. Number two, production largely is geared for local market. In Asia, production, if possible, is largely geared for export in order to maximize income of producers. Finally, expert use in developed countries, there is expertise among those operators to use the market mechanisms to pursue social objectives because they came from there. They just got dropped out. But in Asia, the operators are dependent on helping organizations for effective use of market mechanisms because of lack of skills, because they have dropped out of schools. So the development process is longer, is more costly. Now what then is the future of ACC in Asia? Can social economy initiatives be transformed to become integral components of ACC? Or should Asia skip social economy and follow instead the Latin American development path to solidarity economy? But first, before we decide, let's look at the strengths of social economy in Asia. First, social economy in Asia has the right focus. It is focused on the poor, marginalized, and socially excluded. Second, there is an accumulated wealth of experience in facilitating access of the poor to various resources required for development. Third, there is vast institutional network countrywide. Fourth, it nurtures a vision of social economy as a third sector that is distinct from the state or for-profit private business sector. In other words, it has a notion of an alternative economy. Finally, there is willingness to learn on how to transition to social solidarity economy. These are the strengths of social economy in Asia. I have provided you with a picture of social economy in Asia that is not so palatable, because we need to critique our own experience in Asia. So, what do we need? Having analyzed, having evaluated where we are right now, what do we need? We need a paradigm shift towards ACC. And the first thing that we need to do is to capture the ACC mindset. We need to reflect on the assumptions of our development paradigm. The problem of poverty consists of two interrelated aspects. The short-term issue of lack of access to resources needed for overcoming poverty. The problem with us is that we define the problem of poverty in Asia mainly as a lack of access to resources. So the short-term problem becomes a long-term problem because we are still under the ambit of the liberal market economy, and we cannot get out. We must understand that there is the longer-term problem, longer-term issue of the absence of an alternative economy for, by, and of the poor, social excluded, and marginalized. So, we need to learn to scrutinize every development intervention that we have already done. Let us not baby, look at our development initiatives as if they are our babies and we cannot harm them by criticizing them. We have to reflect, learn to scrutinize, either it is microfinance, organic farming, fair trade, cooperative development, etc., in terms of its capacity not only to address the immediate problem of lack of access to resources, but as well the capacity to tackle the long-term issue or problem of developing ACC as an alternative economy. Finally, let us reorient our resources towards the great transition to ACC. How then do we develop ACC? We have to think of the ACC community, not enterprise. It must be community. The community, rather than enterprise, is the dominant mode of organizing life in ACC. The enterprise is subordinate to the community rather than the other way around. The enterprise is a concoction of the neoliberal market economy. In SSA, the towns are not owned by companies. Instead, companies are owned by townspeople. In other words, SSA established community companies, not company towns. The basic unit is the household, not the enterprise. The community is the holding company that has a stake and controlling interest in all enterprises. Sixto Rojas argues that the household, being co-owner of the community holding company, has a claim on outputs just as land and capital are. Okay, in the old times, 1960s, previously, social solidarity economy was called in Asia the integrated area development. And the household holding company was called multi-purpose cooperative. So there is I don't want to use the term multi-purpose cooperative because it has a different connotation. So, the third, community holding company is the integrator of local supply chains. Instead of developing individually the micro small enterprises producing the same product and competing for consumer patronage, the community holding company integrates production at the community level and facilitates relationships between producers and households as consumers. What we are doing today in Asia is that we try to focus our attention on individual enterprises. Now, 95 to 99% of enterprises in Asia are micro or small enterprises. If you have a development approach that develops them individually, how many centuries are you going to spend in order to cover all micro and small enterprises in your country? Finally, the CSC resolves the issue of the household's participation in the governance of economic activities. Having its roots in the family, the community holding company can use social norms, ethics, and other social philosophies to influence consumer behavior. Its economic transactions can be guided by core values shared by the households and by the sociological and political relationships. The CSC bears the two fundamental dimensions: ethical values and social dimension-oriented governance. And then its goal is triple bottom line. The product serves the community. It maintains ecological conservation and economic sustainability. Now, these are cases of community enterprises in the Philippines. Onion, this is the project of ASCII, one members of APEN in Central Luzon. This is the rice supply chain in Iloilo. This is a project of TSKI, Kaitesa Kausumagan, the president is here of the TSKI. It's another model of social solidarity economy. And we have dairy milk supply chain. Now, what are the basic features of this is a community? One is ethical values. Basically, people and planet over profit. Human beings control capital, not instruments of capital. There's solidarity in which ways between management and workers. In some cooperative like Mondragon, the difference between the lowest paid and the highest paid management is 1:5. But in other profit-oriented corporations, the difference between wages is sometimes 1:1,000. Governance dimension. Community-based supply chains are organized and self-managed by households. Inclusive ordinary people participate in decision-making. Benefits and profit shared by ordinary people. The third dimension is social development. Explicit aim of production is community benefit, not for export. Production is basically to benefit the local community. If there is extra, you can export. For this reason, social solidarity economy is a methodology approach for food sovereignty, because it first look into the benefit of the community. Social responsibilities directed at building sustainable communities. Shared responsibilities approach to development, a vehicle for social inclusion and sustainable development. Economic sustainability, because all people are involved in the enterprise, the community enterprise. And the ecological dimension conservation, they have to conserve the environment in order to make their economy sustainable. Now, all these dimensions can be applied to evaluate what you are undertaking right now. Where are you right now in your transition to ECC? You can use this framework because unless you can define where you are right now and evaluate where you are, you will not be able to pinpoint whether you are transitioning from where you are right now to ECC. This was a case that was applied by our partner here, Ornigas Development Foundation. And they are NGO partners. You will note that the NGO partners are very strong in governance, but we are sometimes weak in social because they didn't have products and services. The private enterprise partners, so SSA can have private enterprise partners. They are weak in governance, they are strong in environment and economic, but weak in ethical and governance aspects. So if you compare where you are right now in terms of the idea, you can see where you are. You can benchmark it. And you can do this on a periodic basis to measure or to gauge where you are right now. So this is a practical way of knowing where you are. And you can see what are the adjustments that you need to undertake in order to go to the great transition. Now, what are the challenges, and I will end my presentation here, of transition to SSE development? For the households, because they are the primary actors in SSE, the households must have the mindset that they are citizens of the community, that they are owners of the community, and that they own the holding company, or maybe you can call it multi-purpose cooperative. Their basic human rights are respected and defended against injustices. Respect for human rights is balanced by a deep sense of awareness of accountability to one's social responsibilities. Citizens who have more in terms of power, education, information, wealth, resources, physical strength, have greater social responsibilities. Now, for the helping organizations, many NGOs are in this category. The challenge is transforming households into the basic unit of community rather than the enterprise. I have always been putting this into agenda, and it is always misunderstood that I am against enterprise. I'm not against enterprise, but the enterprise must recognize the supremacy of the community, that the community must own enterprises and not the other way around. Integration of enterprise to community-based supply chains, where households are both owners and workers, and transformation of the community into a holding company that directs and manages all community-based supply chains. Thank you very much for listening.